Hello, everybody. Today we are going to be talking about the unification of Italy and Germany. And so, just to recap what we've talked about in class last time, the failures of the revolutions of 1848 demonstrated that the idealism of the Enlightenment of the revolutions was not enough to accomplish those revolutionary goals. So, towards the latter part of the Industrial Revolution, the age of realism is going to replace romanticism as this dominant philosophy. And the new political philosophy that's going to come about is called realpolitik, the idea that accomplishing one's political goals via practical means, opposed to idealism, opposed to, the perfect world or how we would want it to be, that we have to set realistic goals and find realistic ways to achieve them. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to get all these ideal ideas about humans having equal rights or equal political rights or things like that. So realpolitik is more about achieving practical means. Okay, and so realpolitik is going to be used to unite Italy and Germany. So we're going to start with Italy. Italy is going to undergo a few nationalist movements beginning in the 1830s. And we would see that happen again in 1848. This was part of those failed revolutions. We would see Italy unite by both military force and diplomatic means. And they would come under the control of the Kingdom of Sardinia. And we'll kind of get into how that happens. So, this is how Italy looks at the beginning of unification. It's divided into several kingdoms, so it's not yet Italy. This area here is under the control of Austria. This is under the control of Sardinia. These are the papal states under the control of the Pope. And then the kingdoms of Naples and Sicily are actually under the control of Spain and the Bourbon family. And so you can see that Italy is quite divided. There are three leaders that we're going to talk about. Mazzini, Garibaldi, and Cavour. Mazzini is the heart, Garibaldi is the sword, and Cavour is the brain. So Mazzini is the leader of the Young Italy group in 1832. He would form this group based on common language and culture, and this was the revolutions of 1848. So he's really the one who very much starts this movement and gets it into play. He is going to be driven into exile, which means he's going to be forced out of the country. Cavour is considered the head, so he's kind of like the brains behind their unification. Cavour wanted to make Sardinia very powerful, increase their industry, reducing the Pope's influence, and he wanted to unify Italy, but only if Sardinia, his king, was in control. And he is also going to use realpolitik to provoke war between France and Austria, which will give him the opportunity to claim the land controlled by both under Italy. So this is Victor Emmanuel II. He would be who Cavour was working for as prime minister and the king, the first king of Italy. So Garibaldi is in the south. He's the leader of a nationalist group called the Red Shirts, and they're in control of Sicily in 1860. They would unify the south using military means and would eventually be forced to merge with the north. And so it all became about this negotiations between Garibaldi, who was in control of the south, and Victor Emmanuel and Cavour in the north. So Cavour would trick Garibaldi into giving up his conquests. North and South Italy were unified under a new constitutional monarchy, and then the unification was complete after they won Venetia during the Austro-Prussian War and Rome after the Franco-Prussian War. So Italy had been attained more by diplomacy and timing rather than military greatness. And so here we have a political cartoon showing Garibaldi putting the Italian boot on Victor Emmanuel's leg and showing that he had helped Victor Emmanuel unite, however unwillingly, under his control. So this actually creates some issues for Italy. So even though they had a constitutional monarchy, none of the rights were still limited. There was still the struggle between liberals and conservatives. And government will eventually expand voting rights, but trouble continues. Regional differences. Northern Italy was more rich, with more cities, kind of like the industrial north. The south was more rural, focusing on an agricultural economy. They also had different dialects and cultural differences. And then, of course, there's a struggle with the Catholic Church of Italy versus the Pope. The Pope would win the right for Vatican City, and the Pope even encourages other Catholics not to cooperate with the government. So Italy is left pretty fragile, even after the unification. Some economic challenges is that as industries continue to grow in northern Italy, it's going to cause both urbanization and population growth. And what happens is the lower classes are going to try and emigrate to the United States for better opportunities. And this is really that first wave of immigration that you learned about in your American history classes. Okay. All right. Nationalism, it can, like we've talked about, can be a force for unity. It can bring countries together. And so our second example would be Germany. After the Congress of Vienna, there are 39 different German states in what is known as the German Confederation. And Austria and Prussia are going to dominate this confederation. And so you can see Austria and Prussia have the largest chunks, and they are not inclined to work together. Okay. Prussians' advantages is that they mainly have a German population. They have a very powerful emerging army. They industrialize very quickly after the British example. They also have access to the Rhineland for rich resources. And then, of course, the fragile conflict or friendship created at the Congress of Vienna would eventually turn to conflict as they try and struggle for power when unifying Germany. So in 1848, Germany would also experience those revolutions, which were a failure. But in Prussia, they were able to create a liberal constitution and limit the power of the king. And so there were some progress made there. King William I is the King of Prussia. He comes to the throne in 1861. He is supported by the Junkers. The Junkers are the wealthy landowning class. They're very conservative. They're going to oppose liberal ideas. Wilhelm is wanting to increase the size and strength of the military, and he decides to pick a new prime minister in order to get what he wanted. Enter Otto von Bismarck. So he's a conservative Junker, and he is going to coin the term realpolitik, or the politics of reality. And he becomes known as the Iron Chancellor for his role in the unification of of Germany, with his realpolitik and powerful role. So Bismarck makes a very famous speech called Blood and Iron. And he says, not by speeches and votes of majority are the great questions of time decided. That was the era of 1848 and 1849, but iron and blood. And so when he talks about iron and blood, he's really referring to the use of military and industry in which to unite Germany. And he actually is able to successfully do this through a series of wars. First would be the 7 Weeks' War between Austria and Prussia. And so Austria is leading the North German Confederation. Okay. And then a united Northern Germany under Prussia's control. Prussia would control the Northern Germany and the northern part of Germany versus Austria. Then in the Franco-Prussian War, remember, this is also when Italy is getting their last pieces unified. This is France versus Prussia. And this would convince the Catholics in southern Germany that unification with Prussia was better than unification with France. So they sort of are able to use a combination of both military and diplomatic means in order to achieve their goals. So this is the beginning of the German Empire. Under Otto von Bismarck, and when it officially comes Germany. Okay, so they start to pull in all of these territories between these years. Okay, so over 6 years, Bismarck creates a united Germany. He made a skillful use of diplomacy and warfare in which to accomplish this task. So in January of 1871, Wilhelm is crowned as the Kaiser at the Palace of Versailles. And this becomes the Second Reich, the name given to the new German Empire, meaning the second government, the Prussian government being the first. And so this would be the Second Reich under Wilhelm, and Germany is now a country. However, much like Italy, Germany is also going to experience problems after unification. So as Iron Chancellor, faces really two big problems. The first of which is what to do with your Catholics, because remember, Germany is dominantly Protestant. And so they worry about Catholics' loyalty to the state than rather the church. So he implements state regulated education, state approval of priests, getting rid of the Jesuits, and a marriage would be administered by the state rather than the church. And then for his socialist solution, what he did is he weakened socialist appeal. Remember, socialists want to create more equality between the social classes. He does this essentially by instituting socialist programs. And so people will turn to the state rather than the socialists because they are providing some of those things that socialists would want. He also shuts down socialist newspapers and meetings. Okay, so so it really was diplomatic diplomacy between Germany and the Catholic Church. So Germany is quickly rising as a world power. In terms of their resources, they do have large amounts of iron and coal. They create an educated workforce through public education, increased population growth. They have strong investments with a centralized banking system. They also start to gain lands and imperialism in order to support that industrialization. Remember our M&Ms. And they start to grow new industries such as chemical and electrical industries, second highest export rates, and of course, tariffs in which to protect them. And so what this does is this upsets the balance of power created by the Congress of Vienna in 1815. And so what happens is we start to see this balance of power shift. And by 1871, both Britain and Germany are the most powerful nations in Europe. So it has shifted, it has broken, and this is going to create tensions between these different states. So after Bismarck, Wilhelm II, he is going to become king, and Bismarck will remain his chancellor until he was dismissed by Wilhelm. Wilhelm II is going to continue with Bismarck's policies, such as building a strong army and navy. He's going to encourage industry and commerce, imperialization and annexation, and this is going to further increase that anxiety between those nations. So again, here you see Bismarck, dignified, walking away from Wilhelm II. Here you have Germany in the back, looking very worried and concerned, and here's Wilhelm II playing with his with his little socialist doll with the TNT arms sticking out. Everything's about ready to explode. And he's sitting on all these cannonballs on his throne. Okay. And so this is kind of like showing you what the concern is with Bismarck leaving and Wilhelm II sort of going crazy with all this militarism. So that wraps us up for today. Make sure to look over this for the quiz on Monday. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.